Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Bolland. Welcome again to Friday Reflections here in the Zoom space of San Diego Oasis. We're always happy to be together, and we're so honored by your presence and your patronage and your financial support and your presence in not only this little half-hour webinar, but in all of the programs that we cook up for y'all here on this side of the San Diego Oasis experience. The most important piece of San Diego Oasis is your presence and your commitment to this endeavor, and we never get tired of saying thank you for that. We know exactly why we're here and exactly who we're here for, and it's you. And so your input, your feedback, when they send out a survey, we really appreciate it when you respond. And as I shared with you last Friday, there's a lot of discussion taking place at San Diego Oasis, as there is in every other organization that I could think of, about how the heck do we roll back into some way, shape, or form of physical presence. When that happens, how that happens, and all of the hundreds of details that arise around those questions. That's what I think just about everybody's working on right now. And it's a good problem to have, because this isn't the problem we had a year ago, right? A year ago, this thing was just ramping up and getting worse and worse every week. So that's a good place to be. So welcome again, and thanks for being here today. What are you thinking about today? It's been an interesting week. And I think one of the things that I'm thinking about today is letting battles end, letting struggles drop. You know, when is the right time to fight and when is the right time to surrender? And I mean this in every possible way, like on the, within one's inner struggles, in personal relationships, in marriages and families, among neighbors. Who is having a feud with their neighbor? In one's social and political citizenry, in the various social justice issues that you and I might be engaged in. When is it time to fight and when is it time to retreat? And it's such a fascinating, ultimately spiritual and philosophical question, because you can't fight all the time. And yet, if you never fight, what good are you? Then you're just going along for the ride on the sacrifice of others who are fighting on your behalf. And I think about that a lot, because it's obviously a middle path between the two, fight and surrender. But navigating that graciously, truthfully, authentically, is our daily work, our hourly work. And not only am I thinking about when is the right time to let battles drop, but this curious tension between stillness and activity, between yin and yang. And I am all up in, you already kind of feel where I'm going, those of you that know this book, the Tao Te Ching. And I'm holding up the Stephen Mitchell translation. Many of you have studied Taoism with me before. This is this curious 25 century old book of Chinese aphorisms, wisdom sayings, the core scripture of Taoism. And I've been all up in this book because I just shot 5 videos for my Asian philosophy class that I put up on my YouTube channel. So yes, for those of you that subscribe to my YouTube channel, you already know there's a brand new playlist that I put up there in the last couple of days, where I looked into the camera, and for 5 20-minute videos, I read 64 of the 81 chapters and discussed them into the camera. So, and now I'm going through on YouTube and editing all the closed captions. So I am just immersed in Taoism. I mean, I've read this book hundreds of times throughout my whole life and taught it too many times to count, but it never ceases to amaze me. And of course, Taoism is all about the assertion of yang and the retreat and emptiness of yin, and how those two things move in a circle, like high tide and low tide, like being and non-being. So not only am I caught by that curious tension between stillness and activity, but also, and this is certainly comes up in my own life and maybe yours too, the relentless egotism that's all tied up in the need to win, the need to be right. And sometimes, I think quite often, we fight much longer than we have to because of that egotism, because of that, I need to beat you right now. I need to win. I need to be right. If you were with us on Tuesday, Swami Harinamananda might say that rajasic energy, rajas, R-A-J-A-S, right? That one of the gunas that is our fiery energy, our ambition, our drive, our self-centeredness, and our woundedness too, right? So always thinking about what everybody's thinking about me, and reacting to everything, and being offended, or basking in the glow of someone's praise. That's all that rajasic stuff. And maybe one of the things that's stirring all this up for me is the news. And I know a lot of you watch the news and follow it as I do. And you know that yesterday, President Biden announced the end of the Afghan war. That by November 11th of this year, by September 11th of this year, a little thing called 9/11, by September 11th of this year, all American troops will be out of Afghanistan. We will be done. We will have left Afghanistan to its own resources and the resources of the other allies who work around there, Turkey and Pakistan and maybe European NATO and whoever else. And so when Biden announced that yesterday, that really kind of stirred some things up for me too. It feels good when a war is declared over. And, 4 presidents before him, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, did not pull out of the war. And one of the things, I don't know if you like Biden or not, but one of the things I think that's fairly admirable about him is that he got on the phone and called George W. Bush, the president under which the war began, and he called his predecessor, Barack Obama, who did not pull out of Afghanistan after promising to try. And all accounts are that his vice president, Biden, rallied for that all the time, but they just couldn't pull it off. And there's always this argument, well, we can't abandon them because then the bad guys will take over. And there's this reason and that reason and this reason and that reason not to pull out of Afghanistan. But apparently the argument is finally holding sway, and it seems so germane to our philosophical question today, that you can't fight forever. We shouldn't have forever wars. Many of you know, because you follow American history as I do, that the Afghan war is the longest war in American history. The Civil War lasted, 4 years, 6 years? This war is 20 years old. It started right after 9/11. In the months after 9/11, we sent troops into Afghanistan to hunt for Al-Qaeda operatives and Taliban operatives who we believed orchestrated the attacks of 9/11. And I think a lot of people were in favor of that war. It was couched as self-defense. I mean, we can't just sit and wait for another attack like that. We have to go find the people who are funding and planning and executing those attacks and kill them. That's our right to defend our life. The Jewish Book of Wisdom, that the Talmud says that if you know that someone is planning your death, you have to go kill them. You don't wait for them to show up at your house. Now, most of us, and certainly our penal code, does not define self-defense that broadly. But I think in many people's minds, there was justice in our attempt to eradicate Al-Qaeda. But as you know, nothing is simple. And I won't tease apart all the threads here, but I'm fascinated, excuse me, by the fact that I have students in my classes who were literally not alive on 9/11/2001. I have 19-year-old students in my classes who have no living memory of 9/11. For them, it's just something in a history book, like for me, say the Korean War. I was born in 58. That thing was over. But I grew up around Korean War veterans. And there are soldiers in Afghanistan. There are American soldiers in Afghanistan right now who were literally not alive when that war began. There are American soldiers in Afghanistan today whose fathers, and in some cases mothers, are Afghan war veterans. This is now a multi-generational war. That is an absurdity by all measures. And all the arguments for staying in Afghanistan are starting to fall on deafer and deafer ears. That it just isn't worth it anymore. That we're never going to build a modern democratic nation state in Afghanistan because they've never been a modern democratic nation state. They're a collection of fiefdoms, principalities, whatever word you want to use, clans that don't seem to have a lot of interest in forming a parliamentarian nation state. You know, certainly there are those factions in Afghanistan, but the Taliban is pushing back against that. So what it's cost us, of course, is 2,300 American souls. It's cost the Afghanis 150, 200,000 dead. It's hard to get a number on that. And it's cost you and I, American taxpayers, trillions and trillions of dollars. That's a number I can't even comprehend, but I can tell you a couple of quick correspondences. With trillions and trillions of dollars, we could instantly solve homelessness, give every American free health care, give every American free access to university postdoctorate education. We could utterly transform the social network, the social foundation of America with trillions and trillions of dollars. Instead, we chose to go to war in a tiny country nestled between Turkey and Pakistan and spend all that money there. And the military industrial complex certainly benefited. The so-called defense industry, certainly they sold a lot of gear and put a lot of food on a lot of Americans' families' tables, I guess. But it makes you wonder for what exactly. Now, the reasons for staying in Afghanistan, if we pull out, there's a very real possibility that the Taliban will increase their grip. This could be a human rights disaster because the Taliban are a notorious ultra extremist. They claim to be Islamic, but every Muslim I talk to disavows any connection to Taliban policy. Deeply sexist. You know, women aren't allowed to learn how to read. The routine assassination of their opponents, the bombing of girls' schools. These are not Muslim behaviors by any stretch of the imagination, in accord with the Quran or with the Hadith, the teachings of Muhammad. The murder of innocents is never authorized. So without the ability of sitting here and adjudicating all of that, I'm thinking about this from a sort of broader perspective, that you always want to do everything you can to protect vulnerable people. And you always want to do everything you can to save innocence and to fight for human rights. But after doing it now for 20 years, you know, I think back in 2001, I was 43 years old, and now I'm 63 on 9/11. I've been a full-time tenure track professor for 20 years now at Southwestern College. Back in 2001, I'd just been hired that summer. I was a brand new tenure track professor. I mean, a lot of water has gone under the bridge in these 20 years. Enough is enough. Is it the role of the United States to perpetually be everywhere, fight in every struggle? And I'm thinking, what is the wisdom of surrender, of just letting go? And I know that it felt good in my gut when I heard the news. When I heard President Biden make that announcement, something kind of lifted off of me, like, good. There is no perfect solution in the field of action. And that is the lesson of the Bhagavad Gita, which I've taught many times here and in other places, and I really adore the great Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna counsels Arjuna, a warrior about to start a battle, who doesn't want to fight. And the wisdom teachings there around, look, to be alive means you're going to struggle in unwinnable wars. And that if you take action, people are going to get hurt. If you don't take action, other people are going to get hurt. No matter what you do, there will be death. There will be loss. and to sort of step into that broader wisdom vision and let go of that egoic idea that I have to run around and fix everything. And if I don't interfere with everything and fix it, then justice isn't done. And the Tao Te Ching is so good on this point too, that sometimes wisdom means stepping back, letting go, letting the Tao unfold. Forms arise and forms fade. We can't manage from ego or nationalism every phenomenon, every dynamic. We can't. And to know when to stop, just like when you knew it was time to get divorced. I don't know if you've been through a divorce, when it, you know, a few years of nightmarishness, and then that morning when you decide and you feel a weight come off of you, and yes, this is the end. Or those of you that have had to close restaurants this year, restaurants that you've sunk hundreds of thousands of dollars of your family's fortune into, and you just have to let it go. It's over. And on to the next adventure. And that moment when you just surrender, when you just stop, that seems to be a big part of the spiritual and wisdom traditions of the world. And on a very different level, I'm going to pivot on a very different level. I'm thinking about my sabbatical from Facebook. I have shared with you, if you've been here before, that for the entire period of Lent, I got off Facebook. I deactivated all my pages. I'd already done it for all of December and most of January, because years and years and years of arguing with everybody about all these political issues, and mostly arguing with strangers, and you know, the futility of that. Although I had a lot of fun there, and I'm not leaving Facebook forever, because there's some things about it that I think are valuable, and I'm going to just try to stick to those. But I don't argue anymore about politics. I don't even post political stuff on Facebook. I've been sorely tempted. How is it possible that I have not said anything about Matt Gaetz on Facebook? I mean, patting myself on the back right here. Oh my God. But, you know, I just can't be that news commentator guy anymore. It's not good for my serenity to live in the constant state of resentment and anger. There is a place for anger and resentment. There is. It drives us. Moral outrage is a powerful tool. When Rosa Parks sat on the whites only seat in the front of the bus, she was expressing moral outrage, very quietly, but moral outrage. That's how stuff gets done, is by people who are outraged, taking risk and taking action. I will never apologize for anybody who does that. But on a sort of personal level, I had to kind of step into a more quiet life, a more quiet existence. And I'm getting better and better at doing that. So I'll share one last story with you, and then we'll close with a poem. But, you know, I have a Gospel of Thomas video on my YouTube channel. It's the most popular video on my YouTube channel. It's up around 7,000 views now. And I want to share with you a quick vignette as a YouTube guy, you know, who makes these videos for my students at Southwestern College, but now it's become kind of like, well, I also make them for my YouTube followers. And it's been a wonderful thing. And I have this YouTube channel, it's getting increasing subscriptions and so on. It's growing. So there's my Rajasic consciousness going, hey, pretty good, you know, I'm getting a lot of followers. I reached certain plateaus, so YouTube allowed me to monetize. So now I'm making a whopping, you know, $50 a month because of the ads that they stick into videos, and it's all kind of exciting. And there's this one video called The Gospel of Thomas, which is my most popular video. I don't know why. I don't know why some videos get 7,000 views and others have 100. I have no idea. Nobody does. And if we could crack that code, we'd all be rich. But there is something happened last week. Another YouTube guy called Robert Sepfer plagiarized my Gospel of Thomas video. He used 90% of my Gospel of Thomas video and put it in a video called The Lost Gospel of Thomas. And my video, my face talking, much like it looks right now, is 90% of his video. Now, he doesn't mention my name in the video. No titles appear in the video with my name. He does credit me in the comments below his video. It's like, Peter Bolland, here's his page. But it's sort of plagiarism. And then I started to learn more about who this guy was. And I don't want to say a lot of bad stuff about him, but he's kind of, he claims to be an anthropologist, and he makes lots of videos about the lost city of Atlantis and who really built the pyramids. And he's most notorious for disputing the universally accepted theory that humanity evolved out of Africa. And he argues instead that people of color are a different species, and that all white people in the world are descendants of white people who founded the lost city of Atlantis. I don't know if Robert Sepper is a Nazi or a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist, but Nazis and neo-Nazis and white supremacists love this guy. And he is soundly criticized by many scholars for erasing Africa from history. So he's highly problematic. And he's also accused of plagiarizing, in his numerous books, he's accused of plagiarizing material whole cloth out of other books. Anyway, I won't tell you much more about Robert Sepper, but my first impulse was to just attack this guy, and demand that he take the video down. But I got to tell you, this guy has 50,000 followers, hundreds of thousands of followers. His The Lost Gospel of Thomas video in the first 3 days had 50,000 views. And because I'm linked there in the comments, a lot of them came to my channel and they started subscribing to my stuff. So I was like, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I'm picking up a lot of new traffic. A lot of these wonderful people might benefit from some of my non-crazy videos, but it's kind of kicked open the door to some unfortunate energy that's coming onto my page, because there are people on Robert Sepper's page who are Holocaust deniers. It just makes me sick to even say that word, Holocaust denier. Every sort of sickening white supremacist conspiracy theory, Illuminati crap idea on YouTube is now trickling into my page. And I don't know if I think that's bad. But maybe some of those folks who don't even know that Robert Sepper does all that stuff, maybe they need to see some of my videos on Buddhism and sort of my normal academic stuff. I talk to my anthropologist friends. They just laugh when I mention this guy's name. And they're like, he's not an anthropologist. There's no record of him going to college ever, let alone having a degree. So I don't know how to adjudicate all that, but I'm framing that all with you this morning as, should I fight this guy? Should I argue with everybody on my thread who says Robert Sepper is great? I'm like, well, he's not that great, because I'm not gonna take on that mantle of the guy who runs around correcting everybody's opinion anymore. And I'm just gonna let it be. I'm just gonna let it happen. There's a line in chapter 81 of the Tao Te Ching, the very last chapter, where Lao Tzu says, wise men don't need to prove their point. Men who need to prove their point aren't wise. And I just drink that in, and I feel the sort of the peace washing over me when I realize it's not my job to go around correcting everybody's erroneous opinions. If it were, that's all I would ever be doing. And that's not why I'm alive. And so that to me is the wisdom of surrender, the wisdom of letting go of struggles. And I feel a lot of sense of peace around this decision. I'm going to read to you a couple passages from the Tao Te Ching. This is chapter 30. Whoever relies on the Tao in governing men doesn't try to force issues or defeat enemies by force of arms. For every force, there is a counterforce. Violence, even well-intentioned, always rebounds upon itself. The master does his job, then he stops. He understands that the universe is forever out of control, and that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao. Because he believes in himself, he doesn't try to convince others. Because he is content with himself, he doesn't need others' approval. Because he accepts himself, the whole world accepts him. That's verse 30 from the Tao Te Ching. And then a little from verse 31. Weapons are the tools of violence. All decent men detest them. Weapons are the tools of fear. A decent man will avoid them, except in the direst necessity, and if compelled, will use them only with the utmost restraint. Peace is his highest value. If the peace has been shattered, how can he be content? His enemies are not demons, but human beings like himself. He doesn't wish them personal harm, nor does he rejoice in victory. How could he rejoice in victory and delight in the slaughter of men? He enters battle gravely, with sorrow and with great compassion, as if he were attending a funeral. And I got to tell you, I've shared this many times. I've had the honor and privilege of working with young men, mostly young combat veterans, Marines, who come into my classrooms, and we study the Bhagavad Gita together, and they come with me to my office and they share war stories with me about how they had to kill in Afghanistan and how they shot young men just like themselves who were just defending their village against the bristling military might of the American Pentagon. You know, U.S. Marines coming into these agrarian medieval villages, and these poor kids trying to fight back. And we send people there to shoot those people and their uncles and their fathers. And when you put an American boy in that situation and they come back to my classroom and they go, I don't know why I was there. I don't know what I was doing. Why did I kill those kids? And why did they kill my friend who I held in my arms, crying for their mothers as they died? And this, I'll never forget this one particular Marine, you know, sitting in my office crying. And he said, you know, I had to get rid of all my guns. I can't touch a gun ever again. And I think about President Biden's decision to end that war. And I rejoice in that decision. I don't know what's next. I know it will cause problems, our withdrawal. And so I want to close today with a poem called Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda, the great Spanish poet, 1904 to 1973. Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment, without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Now I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. Pablo Neruda, Keeping Quiet. See you next time, my friends. See you on the other side.